Why is it that even when everything is fine, you still feel like something is missing? Why did getting what you wanted bring none of what you expected? Why is it so hard to stop the mind? Who, exactly, is suffering in there? And what I want to share here is what has genuinely settled in me, even if the looking never really stops. The ego is something most spiritual conversations mishandle. When people hear that word, they think of arrogance, someone who thinks too highly of themselves. And the teachers we've explored on this channel, their words on the ego can sound uncompromising, almost like a verdict. I've sat with those teachings long enough to notice something that gets lost in how we receive them. The ego becomes a villain to be defeated, rather than a structure to be understood. The ego forms early, before language almost. Something in you begins to draw a line between me and everything else, that this body has needs, that there is danger, that some things belong to me and some things don't. A child without that structure can't protect itself, can't develop any sense of self at all. So the ego is a stage, a necessary one. What the masters are pointing to, I think, is what happens when it calcifies, when a stage becomes a prison, because the ego sees from a very specific position. Separation. Me here, the world out there. I need to prove myself. I need to secure things. I need others to see me in a certain way to feel safe. When that runs without awareness, without any sense that it's running, it stops protecting you. It starts limiting what you can see. The window fogs over. You're still seeing something through it, but you have no idea what you're missing. The word awakening, it's treated like an achievement, like something you earn after enough practice, enough suffering, enough time with the right teachers. Something in that framing has always felt off to me. Awakening, as I've come to understand it, is simpler. Awakening is a recognition. Most people move through life experiencing themselves as a small self somewhere inside the head, watching through these eyes, having thoughts, feeling emotions, living in a body, and assuming that's the whole of what they are. It's a reasonable assumption. Experience seems to confirm it. The shift begins when you notice something very quiet. If you can observe your thoughts, you are something other than the thoughts. If you can feel your emotions, you are something other than the emotions. If you can sense the body, you are something other than the body. What are you then? You are what notices. The awareness behind all of it, the space in which thoughts arise and pass, emotions move through, sensations appear and dissolve, but which is not itself any of those things. And this isn't a belief you adopt. It's something that can be felt. When it's felt, even slightly, even for a fraction of a second, the relationship with everything changes. You haven't become something new. You've recognized something that was always already there. I want to tell you about someone. She built an academic career over many years, driven in a way that went beyond ambition. What she wanted was recognition, to have her name mean something, to be taken seriously, to be seen as someone worth listening to. She worked for that with everything she had. Then came the award, the biggest one in her field, the thing she'd been quietly building toward. She stood there with that piece of paper in her hands and felt nothing, a vast, quiet emptiness. One question forming underneath it: is this it? What followed surprised her more than the emptiness had. Anxiety she couldn't locate, physical pain with no medical explanation, panic that woke her at night. She had done everything right. She had arrived, and somehow it had made things worse. So she started searching. She was a scientist, skeptical by training, resistant to anything she couldn't verify. She searched because the noise in her mind had become unbearable. She wanted it to stop. Over time, through therapy and movement and breathwork, something began to loosen. And then at a retreat, during an intensive breathing practice, something happened that she still struggles to describe. She felt something beyond the body, an expansion, a sense of connection with everything, with something she had no name for. It made no rational sense. It was the most real thing she had ever felt. She came back changed. But that's only the middle of the story. After the expansion came what certain mystics call the dark night of the soul, confusion, fear, and a kind of seeing, turned inward, of everything she had refused to look at, the arrogance she'd been carrying without knowing it, the shadow that the light had suddenly made visible. She had expected awakening to bring only light. Instead, she saw herself with a clarity that was almost unbearable. One night, exhausted, on the floor, she did something she hadn't done since she was a child. She surrendered to something larger than what she could manage alone. And the fear left, all at once, gone. She didn't become a different person. She recognized something in herself the ego had been covering. That recognition, quiet and unspectacular, was what changed everything. People ask me, how do I know if I've awakened? Have I already started? Krishnamurti used to resist that question. The answer lives in the looking, he said. And a question about arrival is already looking in the wrong direction. So rather than describing what awakening looks like, I want to ask you something directly. Has there ever been a moment, even a brief one, where you noticed yourself thinking, rather than just being swept along in the thought? A small gap. A fraction of a second where you saw the thought as a thought, separate from you. That gap is what I'm pointing to. Nisargadatta said, the mind creates the abyss, and the heart crosses it. The crossing looks nothing like what we imagine. It looks like a very quiet noticing. And if something in you has started to notice, not to fix or judge, just to notice, something has already begun. From what I've seen, and from my own experience, this opening tends to happen in one of two ways. Sometimes it comes through curiosity, a book that lands unexpectedly, a conversation that shifts something, a question that keeps returning. The door opens gently, and you move through it gradually, almost without realizing. And sometimes it comes through pain, a loss the ego can't resolve, a collapse that control couldn't prevent, a moment when everything built to feel secure simply stops working. The ego resists that moment more than almost anything. It will stay in a suffering it recognizes before it will move toward a freedom it doesn't. The walls of its own prison are at least familiar. What's outside is unknown. Pain breaks that calculation. Something in you already knows there's more. And sometimes it takes a complete failure of the old way before you stop trying to repair it and begin to actually look. Ramana Maharshi said the question, "Who am I?" is meant to be lived, to be held, until the one who is asking begins to dissolve. Pain is often what makes you willing to hold it that long. Awakening gets described in ways that can create a kind of fantasy. So let me say what it actually leaves unchanged. The thoughts keep coming. The emotions remain. The practical difficulties of being human stay exactly as difficult. Hard days, anger, grief, fear, confusion, all of it continues. What changes is the relationship to all of that. You begin to see the ego as a role rather than your identity. The name, the history, the people you love, the things you're here to do, none of that disappears. But underneath all of it, there's something that doesn't move when everything else does. A quiet that isn't emptiness. The urgency to prove yourself softens. The search for something outside, to fill what feels hollow inside, that quiets. Life stays as it is. Something in you simply stops believing the answer is out there. And this may be the most confronting thing awakening reveals. How much you were carrying that was never yours to carry. How much of the searching was covering something that was never actually missing. The happiness you kept looking for in recognition, in love, in achievement, it was always present. Covered, but present. The ego covered it while doing its job, protecting you from something it couldn't understand. So, who is suffering in there? When I sit with that question honestly, what comes back is, not me. The program running, the fogged window, the structure built for protection that slowly became the thing I couldn't see past. You don't need to destroy it. You don't need a dramatic experience, or years of practice, or the right tradition. You need what you already have, the capacity to notice, to look at the mind rather than from it, even for a moment, even imperfectly. That's where it starts. It started there for me. And if you're still here watching this, I think it may have already started for you too. Who are you when the thoughts go quiet?